No need to buy Switch 2 in an alternate universe, because apparently Mario Kart World was initially planned for the original Nintendo Switch. Finding out new information about this game has been very strange. Obviously, we had the little teaser at the beginning of the year with the Switch 2 reveal. We had the huge blowout of information for Mario Kart World during the Switch 2 presentation at the beginning of April. And then after that, it didn't really feel like we were finding out that much new information about the game. We've obviously had the press events, we had that Nintendo Direct specifically for Mario Kart World, which didn't provide too much information, but today feels like the first day that we've really got a bunch of new stuff to talk about with the new Ask the Developer from Nintendo, all about the development of Mario Kart World. So there is a lot of information to inspect and digest, and any word that describes being like a little Sherlock Holmes when it comes to Nintendo games. So that's what I'm here for, guys. So today's video, I just wanted to go over the history of this game, with it starting all the way back in 2017, surprisingly. Specifically, March 2017, which is like a month before Mario Kart 8 Deluxe even came out for the system officially. Obviously, they were done with development for it. I'm sure it went gold and all that, but starting it immediately, not even before the next Mario Kart game release, pretty interesting. Now, I think the main reason why they decided to just jump right in is because they weren't necessarily prepared for how well Mario Kart 8 Deluxe would do on the Switch 1. Obviously, it was just a port. They're like, you know what? Yep, let's quickly get a Mario Kart out there for people to play, and then we can focus on making a true successor to this game. And by the end of 2017, it went from prototyping to full-on development for, obviously, the Nintendo Switch 1 hardware. Not the Switch 2, guys. I don't think the Switch 2 was even in the talks, even over there at Nintendo back then. Well, it probably was. They're probably always thinking. They're probably thinking about the Switch 3 or whatever it is right now. But even at the early stages of development, it's always had the design philosophy that this Mario Kart game would be a seamless, connected world rather than isolated tracks like the previous games. And actually, this is where the origins of the title Mario Kart World even came to be. It was right at the beginning of the concept. Yabuki, the producer of the game, even said that if the idea had just been to add more courses, then they would have likely just called the next game Mario Kart 9. But as development was speeding ahead, chugging along, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, obviously, because developing an entire open world Mario Kart for the hardware of the Switch 1, I don't know how exactly that would work out in the end. And I think they were wrestling with that throughout the entirety of its initial development on the Switch 1 platform. They were concerned that maintaining 60 FPS wouldn't be possible, split-screen multiplayer might have had technical issues, and the fact that they wouldn't be able to express all the ideas they had if they stuck with the initial hardware. Real-time weather and lighting, seamless terrain transitions, and of course, 24-player races. So, with not wanting to make any compromises to their vision, they had to sacrifice, or at least think about sacrificing, a few other things. Either reduce resolution, lower the frame rate from 60 FPS to 30 FPS, and of course, cut graphical fidelity. No matter what, they did not want to give up on their vision. And luckily for them, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe managed to just blow up and continue to sell like crazy, to the point where they discussed releasing an expansion to it, known as the Booster Course Pass. Maybe you heard of it. And apparently, once that was decided, it provided way more development time for World's timeline. This had the benefit of giving them more development time on World, and simultaneously gave new life to Mario Kart 8, keeping it relevant and keeping us, the fans, not waiting forever and ever for the next Mario Kart game. And this silly little Mario Kart Tour ports of the maps onto Mario Kart 8 was the catalyst for them to push Mario Kart World from the Switch 1 with all of its compromises and stress of, oh, can we do this, can we do that, onto the Switch 2 in 2020, which doesn't feel that long ago, but that was bloody 5 years ago, guys. Funnily enough, they didn't have the hardware with them. They just had like the estimated specs of what the Switch 2 would have, but they weren't going to think about that. They didn't care about that. This transition from Switch 1 to Switch 2 development gave, and I quote, a ray of hope to the development team for Mario Kart World. Since the game was coming to a much more powerful console, they could have the full implementation of 24-player races, time of day and weather mechanics, and made the team members in charge of terrain very, very happy because it meant they could place more trees. That's a very wholesome fact. Everyone loves a good tree. Basically, long story short, if it stayed on Switch 1, it would have looked like the Wild Zone or whatever it's bloody called from Pokemon Sword and Shield. And I'm not sure if this would have affected the performance on Switch 1, but something interesting to note as well is that all the tools for this game are also built entirely from scratch. This game has no code, I believe, taken from previous Mario Kart games. Like, it's not Mario Kart 8's engine built on top or anything like that, completely from the ground up with all the tools brand new across the board. And obviously, in my opinion, this was a fantastic choice to shift it to Switch 2. I think if this game was released on Switch 1, it would have really been compromised. And also the fact that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was performing so well and selling so much, I think that would have undermined this game, especially if it had performance issues, like especially if split screen wasn't working properly or is on at like 15 frames per second. Most people would say, don't get Mario Kart World, just get Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and stick with that. I think there would have been a lot more debate between which Mario Kart game was better and make them compete a lot. And I do trust that these developers could have made this work, but I think there would have been a lot more comparison between this game looking less graphically impressive compared to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. This is also like speculating in a world where we don't get the Booster Course Pass, but oh my god, if this game came out on Switch 1 and we got the Booster Course Pass, it would have been it would have been a dangerous situation for this game. It would have been a bit sad. I'm sure it would have still been fun and would have been great and a fantastic new fresh experience for the series. But then, think about the Switch 2's launch as well. How would have that gone? If we didn't have Mario Kart World on Switch 2 for launch, and we had that game like maybe a couple years ago in 2022 or something, what would have been the launch title for this console? Would it have been Donkey Kong? Would have just waited for that? Would they have created something new, something a little bit more casual? I really feel like Mario Kart World is the perfect launch title for a new console, or just Mario Kart in general is a perfect launch title for a new console. There is the argument that releasing it later on could have a secondary boost on sales for the console, but just look at the original Switch. That game released on the Switch only a month after the Switch released. I think Mario Kart 8 Deluxe released April 18th, 2017, if I'm not mistaken. And look, guys, I'm about to say something which might get you a tiny bit angry, but hear me out. Just hear what I'm saying. Hearing that the game has been in development for that long could, I'm not saying it does, it could justify or give a decent enough reasoning for why it's priced a little bit higher, or a lot higher, than traditional video games, or than previous Mario Karts. Again, not saying that it's alright, not saying that I agree with it, but I think that could have been a reasoning for Nintendo to be like, okay, I think we should price this a little bit higher for the amount of time we put into this and the fact that it's cost us more and more time than we initially expected and that the game's continuing to grow. Saying that, some games take ages in development and don't have a spiking price compared to that. So, that is still a debate. I think it's still a worthy conversation to talk about. I don't really have too strong an opinion on it, especially being someone who got the bundle, so I got it discounted. But you get what I'm saying? Like, I think it's an interesting conversation to at least have, and I think some people who are extremely strong in defending Nintendo with a price, or on the other side, people who are incredibly angry with how the game is being priced. This new information from this Ask for Developer really gives a bit more insight into what's been going on with this game. And I think that's definitely going to potentially affect some conversations in regards to this topic. I'm not saying one way or another, but it's interesting. It's interesting to debate and chat and think about all this stuff. So those are my thoughts initially on the development of this game. The fact that it's been in development for 8 bloody years is insane. And I'm really bloody excited. The fact that this game has over 200 tracks of music, oh my god. But I'm going to do a couple more videos probably on the same Ask for Developer volume. But if you're interested in giving it a read yourself, it's linked in the description. But yeah, that's me going, and bye.